Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Thank you for your testimony today. This week, there were very concerning reports that the Solomon Islands plan to sever their ties with Taiwan in favor of China. What message do you think this sends to the region, and what can the U.S. do to help prevent our allies from succumbing to economic or military pressure exerted by the PRC?
Senator, thanks for that question. The late-breaking news on that was unfortunate, and it's part of a larger strategy to slowly squeeze Taiwan's international space. And this is why there is a Taiwan's Relations Act. This is why I'm very familiar with it, and will insist that we continue to abide by that. In addition to agreements such as the third communique, which indicates that in order to resolve this issue through dialogue and peacefully, as we all agreed to do, that there are certain things we're going to have to do. Arms sales, as you note, about $10 billion of arms sales in 2019 alone, of a defensive nature, to ensure that that Taiwan has the opportunity to negotiate in dialogue with the PRC. So, as far as protecting its international space, again, we are very actively involved in that. As I mentioned earlier, the Secretary stopped through the Micronesia. That's a hard stop to make, and we still went out there to demonstrate U.S. concern, interest, and commitment in the area.
The 2017 U.S. National Security Strategy describes China as a, quote, competitor. The 2018 National Defense Strategy refers to China as a strategic competitor. And then the 2019 Intelligence Strategy puts China in the category of adversaries. What is the intended implications, if any, of these various labels, and how do you view China going forward?
Senator, as you know, words matter. As I said previously, that we need to choose them very carefully, in my mind, especially with regard to ensuring that we're talking about the Communist Party and not the people. But in this case, I think strategic competitor has the right flavor. From my time in Beijing 8 years ago, we were hoping that we would come to that realization sooner than later. I'm not going to parse words on the Intel report. I'm not sure of its authoritativeness. But the point is that the U.S. administration, the Congress, have all come to the conclusion that this thing, we need to kind of get busy and take active steps to deal with this thing. And as mentioned earlier, allies and partners, presence, visibility, and again, all the things the administration has done to date, I think, address this.
Now, China is, of course, investing billions in the Belt and Road Initiative, is also actively promoting espionage, and is also pushing Huawei to build the infrastructure of 5G, along with the capacity of China to monitor and intercept communications among our allies. What is your assessment of how effective what China is doing on each of those fronts, and what more should we be doing to press back?
Senator, I think one of the great aspects of our country and our system, and the system that our like-minded allies and partners share, is we're comparatively slow to anger. We tend to give the benefit of the doubt, and so I think we've been hopeful that the Chinese cyber strategy would be resolved. And we've been talking about this for years. This is not just in the last 3 years, but trying to get at China's intent with using cyber to its own benefit. In the case of Huawei now, we have finally come to realize, and we're trying to encourage others to admit and understand that the systems here are under the direct control of the Chinese government. They have laws that say that Chinese companies will release information at the Chinese government's direction. And so the fact that it's we're talking about in this hearing, says I think it has achieved that level of awareness. Others are aware of the problem. And and we'll continue to work on offering alternatives, pushing other, people want better technology, and I think we need to help get to that.
So one final question. Washington has believed for decades that we could change China into a friend by trading with them. And yet we're seeing evidence that at least some of the reverse is playing out. That China is changing the behavior of American companies. So multiple U.S. airlines designated Taiwan as a Chinese province in order to maintain access to China. Google began development of Project Dragonfly, a search engine compliant with the Great Firewall censorship requirements. Apple has located iCloud servers in China in cooperation with a Chinese state-owned enterprise. And Thermo Fisher has exported AI technology for, quote, law enforcement purposes in China. How should the United States think through a framework for economic cooperation when we're seeing American companies being co-opted into helping the communist government maintain power and maintain oppression?
So that's a great question. There is plenty that the government can do, but in the end, there's a business model here that looked too good to be true and is quickly being understood to be not all that it appears to be. And so you're seeing businesses recognize this as they now look for other places, both as markets and as places to do business, and they're leaving for other destinations where maybe labor costs are lower or maybe the business environment is better. And so obviously the government, certainly this administration, has taken pretty significant steps to help business understand the downside of the things that you mentioned. And you are seeing positive change in that regard as it diversifies, as people look at different markets and the rest, which I think is economically a healthy idea, rather than have it all in one place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cruz.